In a shadowy underground chamber, a flicker of candlelight dances across ancient gold. A lone archaeologist catches his breath. Has he really done it? At this very moment, Howard Carter stands at the threshold of a pharaoh's tomb sealed for 3,300 years. The air is heavy and still. As Carter peers inside, treasures gleam back at him, untouched by time. But little does he know, the world's most infamous curse is about to be unleashed. Within months, death will strike unexpectedly, and whispers of an ancient warning, death comes on swift wings to him who disturbs the pharaoh, will grip the world. Is it coincidence, superstition, or something beyond our understanding? The next 15 minutes will reveal the chilling tale of King Tutankhamun's curse, a legend that refuses to die. The notion of a pharaoh's curse did not begin with Tutankhamun. In fact, the idea of vengeful mummies had haunted imaginations for centuries. As far back as the 7th century, Arab writers warned against tampering with Egyptian tombs, believing ancient magic would punish trespassers. By the 19th century, mummies' curse tales were popular in Victorian ghost stories. The first such story was published as early as 1699. Egyptian tombs sometimes even bore dire warnings for grave robbers. Long before Carter's time, Western adventurers and locals alike whispered that disturbing the dead could unleash misfortune. So when Tutankhamun's tomb was discovered in the 1920s, the world was primed to see omens in every shadow. And ominous signs did appear, or so the stories go. Valley of the Kings, Egypt, 1922. For 5 long years Howard Carter had been searching for the lost tomb of Tutankhamun, a little-known boy pharaoh who died around 1323 BC. Funded by his patron, Lord Carnarvon, Carter's quest seemed hopeless, until one morning a water boy stumbled on a stone step hidden in the sand. On November 26, 1922, Carter finally peered into the tomb's antechamber. When Carnarvon asked, "Can you see anything?" Carter famously replied, "Yes, wonderful things," gazing at statues, gold, and riches untouched for millennia. It was a monumental discovery, the first largely intact royal tomb ever found. But as the world celebrated, local workers grew uneasy. Among the treasures at the entrance stood 2 life-sized guardian statues crowned with cobra serpents. That very evening, a cobra snake slithered into Carter's camp, reportedly killing his pet canary in its cage. To Egyptian onlookers, this was a chilling sign. The pharaoh's sacred cobra had struck down the intruder's bird, a warning from Tutankhamun's spirit to stay away. Word of this eerie omen spread quickly, marking the first whispers that Tut's tomb might be protected by a curse. On February 16, 1923, Carter, Carnarvon, and a select few finally entered the sealed burial chamber of King Tutankhamun. Inside, they found the pharaoh's stunning golden sarcophagus and mummy, surrounded by gilded shrines and inscrutable wall paintings. Contrary to later legend, no inscribed curse was found anywhere in Tutankhamun's tomb, no tablet proclaiming doom to intruders. The walls bore prayers and spells for the afterlife, but nothing threatening the living. Still, the atmosphere was otherworldly. Imagine the flicker of candles on painted walls, the smell of ancient incense, the silent gaze of statues. Everyone present felt the weight of history. Outside, journalists clamored for details of the century's greatest archaeological find. Carter, wary of the press frenzy, had even struck an exclusive deal with the Times of London to manage coverage. Yet even his careful planning couldn't stop what came next. Within weeks of the tomb's opening, tragedy struck, and superstition took on a life of its own. In March 1923, just a few weeks after the Grand Chamber opening, Lord Carnarvon fell mysteriously ill. The 56-year-old aristocrat had been bitten on the cheek by a mosquito, then aggravated the bite while shaving. The small wound turned septic. Fever set in, worsening into blood poisoning and pneumonia. Cairo's best doctors rushed to save him, but his condition deteriorated rapidly. As Carnarvon lay delirious in a Cairo hospital, journalists smelled a sensational story. The Courier-Journal in Kentucky had already run a dramatic headline when he first took ill: Pharaoh's 3,000-year-old curse is seen in illness of Carnarvon's. On April 5, 1923, just 2 months after entering Tutankhamun's tomb, Lord Carnarvon died. To the public, the terrible coincidence was unmistakable: the curse of the pharaohs had claimed its first victim. And in that poignant moment, as legend has it, Cairo was plunged into darkness. The city's lights abruptly went out as Carnarvon passed away, feeding rumors that uncanny forces were at work. Was this merely a power outage in an unreliable grid, or the wrath of a disturbed ancient king? The world was about to erupt in curse fever. Lord Carnarvon's death sent shockwaves across the globe. Newspapers from London to New York blared sensational stories of the mummy's curse, suggesting Carnarvon's demise was no mere illness. After all, how could it be chance that he died so soon after violating Tutankhamun's tomb? Suddenly, every detail became an omen in retrospect. Journalists noted that at the exact minute of Carnarvon's death, his dog Susie howled and dropped dead back in England, a chilling anecdote, though inconveniently misaligned by time zones. Reports claimed all the lights in Cairo city went out at that moment, a poetic exaggeration of a brief local power cut. The popular novelist Marie Corelli fanned the flames by writing a public letter that warned of the most dire punishment for any rash intruder into a sealed tomb, citing an obscure Arabic manuscript. Corelli even speculated that secret poisons or ancient germs might have killed Carnarvon, pointedly asking, was it a mosquito bite that has so seriously infected Lord Carnarvon? Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes, told reporters he believed Carnarvon's death was caused by an evil elemental spirit unleashed to defend the king's mummy. With famous figures lending credence, the curse narrative exploded. In the blink of an eye, Tutankhamun's tomb had gone from an archaeological wonder to the epicenter of a global ghost story. The public was enthralled and terrified in equal measure. In the weeks after Carnarvon's death, Egyptomania took on a darker edge. Lady Evelyn Herbert, Carnarvon's daughter who had also entered the tomb, found herself besieged by reporters convinced she was marked by the curse. When Lady Carnarvon departed Egypt with her husband's coffin, fellow passengers on the steamer cancelled their bookings, fearing the jinx might doom the voyage. Back in England, spiritualists claimed to receive psychic warnings from ancient Egyptian spirits, and seance circles breathlessly reported messages from Tutankhamun's beyond. The British Museum, in London, was inundated with strange packages. Panicked citizens mailed back ancient souvenirs, bits of mummy wrappings, figurines, even skeletal hands, that they had previously purchased, begging curators to take them back before the curse could claim them. Every few days, newspapers printed new interviews and conjectures. Some scholars and writers dismissed the curse as bunkum and dangerous superstition. But many others continued to stoke the fear. The curse had become a full-fledged media sensation, an intoxicating mix of ancient mystery and modern mass hysteria. Over the next few years, every untimely death even loosely connected to Tutankhamun's tomb fed the legend of the curse. Newspapers tallied a growing list of supposed victims. In July 1923, just months after Carnarvon, an Egyptian prince named Ali Kamel Fahmy Bey, who had met Carnarvon, was shot dead by his wife in London, and whispers blamed the curse. In 1924, Sir Lee Stack, the governor of Sudan, was assassinated in Cairo. Despite the political motive, the press muttered that Tut's anger had struck again. That same year, Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, the radiologist who had x-rayed Tutankhamun's mummy, died from a mysterious illness. One by one, more names were added. Arthur Mace, a member of Carter's excavation team, died in 1928 of suspected arsenic poisoning. Captain Richard Bethell, Carter's personal secretary, was found smothered to death in his bed in 1929. A few months later, Bethel's grief-stricken father, Lord Westbury, leapt from a building to his death in 1930. His suicide note reportedly said he could no longer stand the horrors he'd witnessed, fueling further morbid speculation. To the feverish public, it appeared that a deadly domino effect was in motion. No matter how disparate the causes, murder, illness, accident, they were all woven into the curse's tapestry. Each headline screamed that the pharaoh's vengeance was real. Through all this, the man at the center of it all, Howard Carter, remained steadfastly skeptical. He openly called the curse Tommy rot and grew irritated with the media's obsession. Carter had seen colleagues and friends die, yes, but he attributed it to the natural course of life, not supernatural revenge. He knew that most of these so-called victims had never even set foot in Tut's tomb. Some, like Prince Fahmy or Sir Lee Stack, weren't involved in the excavation at all. Their tragedies were pure happenstance. Carter also observed an obvious inconsistency: not a single Egyptian member of the dig team was suffering any curse. The superstition seemed to target only Westerners in the popular imagination, which even Egyptian observers found absurd. By the late 1920s, Egypt's own press mocked the curse tale as a product of foreign fantasy. Carter himself continued his work, meticulously cataloguing Tutankhamun's treasures, refusing to dignify the curse with concern. But privately, he seethed at how the hard science of his discovery was being overshadowed by tabloid mysticism. He would later recall with frustration that if he had his way, he'd have put a sign at the tomb entrance reading "Science in, Superstition out." Still, despite Carter's protests, the legend only grew. Each new misfortune, no matter how explainable, was seized upon by a world eager for mystery over mundane truth. As the 1920s drew to a close, the curse of King Tut showed no sign of loosening its grip on the public imagination. By now, the story had all the irresistible elements: ancient royalty, glittering treasure, death, and mystery. It didn't matter that many experts debunked it. In lonely graveyards and cozy pubs alike, people whispered that perhaps the old Egyptians knew something we modern folk did not. Nearly 7 years on, in 1929, one paper dramatically proclaimed that 11 of the 20 people present at the tomb's opening have died, an exaggerated body count that stuck in readers' minds. In truth, that statistic was shoddy at best, but few bothered with verification. The curse legend had become self-sustaining, a snowball rolling down a hill of credulity. And it was about to face its biggest test, the scrutiny of science. Could there be a kernel of truth behind the curse after all? Was some hidden killer lurking in the tomb's depths, more subtle than a vengeful spirit? Or was it all merely coincidence and clever storytelling? The answers, as researchers would find, were as fascinating as the myth itself. Amid the furor, a few brave souls set out to separate fact from fiction. One was Herbert E. Winlock, a respected Egyptologist. In 1934, a dozen years after Tutankhamun's tomb was opened, Winlock compiled hard data to challenge the curse narrative. He listed every person present at key moments of the excavation. The results were revealing: of the 26 people at the initial opening of the burial chamber in 1923, only 6 had died within the next decade. When the sarcophagus was lifted in 1924, 22 people were present. By 10 years later, only 2 of those had died. And of the 10 individuals who witnessed the final unwrapping of Tutankhamun's mummy in 1925, not a single one died within 10 years. In fact, many of those closest to the mummy lived long, healthy lives. These numbers were a statistical smackdown to the curse theory. Far from dying in droves, the excavation team largely outlived average folks of their generation. One striking example was Sergeant Richard Adamson, the British soldier assigned to guard the tomb day and night. He remained perfectly hale and lived on for 60 more years, until 1982. And of course, Howard Carter himself was the ultimate refutation. The man who first entered the tomb and even handled the mummy's remains didn't drop dead at all. He lived for 16 more years, dying at age 64 in 1939. As one investigator later quipped, the pharaoh's curse seemed to extend life rather than shorten it. Armed with these facts, scientists and skeptics began to turn the tide. The curse was not an ancient hex, but a modern myth, one ripe for a closer, clinical look. Still, a question lingered: why did so many people feel the curse was real? Perhaps there was something tangible behind the legend, not magic, but science. In the decades following the tomb's opening, researchers proposed a compelling theory: maybe hidden toxins or pathogens in the sealed tomb had harmed Carnarvon and others. After all, Egyptian tombs are time capsules filled with organic offerings, food, flowers, even mummified pets, all potentially breeding grounds for dangerous microbes. Modern microbiologists found that some ancient tombs harbor deadly molds like Aspergillus niger and Aspergillus flavis, which can cause severe allergic reactions and lung hemorrhages in people with weakened immune systems. Bacterial growth was another threat. Walls in dank chambers might be covered with strains of Pseudomonas or Staphylococcus that assault the respiratory system. Additionally, the air inside a long-sealed sarcophagus can accumulate toxic gases, ammonia, formaldehyde, even hydrogen sulfide, fumes that can burn the eyes and lungs, or cause illness if inhaled in high concentration. Some tombs also house colonies of bats, with droppings that carry histoplasmosis, an infection that can resemble a flu from hell. To scientists, all this sounded like a plausible curse. A tomb could indeed strike explorers down, not with mystical malice but with microbes and mold. Lord Carnarvon, they noted, already had fragile health. He'd nearly died in a car crash years before and suffered chronic infections. It wasn't hard to imagine that an immunocompromised man poking around a dusty, germ-laden tomb might catch a deadly illness. For a while, the idea of a toxic tomb captured the public's imagination as a rational explanation for the curse. But did these scientific explanations hold up in Carnarvon's case? Modern experts tend to say no. In 2013, a scientific review by epidemiologist F. de Wolfmiller concluded that Lord Carnarvon's death was likely unrelated to any tomb toxins. For one, Carnarvon's fatal illness, blood poisoning that led to pneumonia, struck months after his last tomb visit. Any acute pathogen from the tomb would probably have made him sick much sooner. What's more, Carnarvon had been battling infections and poor health even before he arrived in Egypt. As Dr. Miller dryly noted, given the generally unsanitary conditions of 1920s Egypt, Carnarvon would likely have been safer in the tomb than outside in terms of infectious disease risk. In other words, the Earl may have been doomed by a mundane bacterium, not an ancient curse. And what about the broader pattern? In 2002, the prestigious British medical journal finally put the mummy's curse to the test of statistics. Dr. Mark Nelson examined the records of 44 Westerners in Egypt during the tomb's opening, 25 who had been exposed to the tomb, and 19 who had not. The result? No difference in survival rates. Those who entered Tut's tomb lived just as long on average as those who never went near it. In fact, the tomb visitors lived to a healthy median age of around 70, with an average of 20 more years of life after 1922. This was normal for their class and era. The curse had zero statistical support. It was sound and fury, signifying nothing. With science peeling away the layers of mystique, the curse should have crumbled into history. And yet, there was one final twist to come from the legend. Howard Carter lived to see the pendulum begin to swing from sensationalism back to scholarship. But fate can be ironic. When Carter himself died of lymphoma in early 1939, over 16 years after he first opened the tomb, some newspapers just couldn't resist. They resurrected the curse for one last morbid encore. In Carter's obituary, a few writers mused that perhaps the pharaoh's curse had finally claimed the chief desecrator at last. Never mind that he was 64 and died of cancer. To a myth, any death can be molded to fit. Carter died unmarried and somewhat bitter, having never received British honours for his discovery, and having outlived many of his contemporaries. One can imagine him in the beyond, rolling his eyes at the papers linking his natural death to that Tommy Rot curse he so despised. Yet, paradoxically, this enduring legend has given Carter and Carnarvon a kind of immortality. Their names live on as characters in a story that still captivates us. The Curse of Tutankhamun became the most famous supernatural tale in archaeology, one that overshadowed even the pharaoh's own historical life. As the dust settled and World War II loomed, the tomb and its curse slipped out of headlines. But the story was far from over. It would soon find new life on screen, in print, and in the halls of popular culture for decades to come. The tomb's treasures went on display and toured the world, and the scientific truth was well established, yet the mystique of the curse proved unkillable. In reality, King Tutankhamun had been a minor pharaoh, his short life largely unremarkable. But in death, his name achieved everlasting fame, thanks in no small part to the curse legend. As one historian noted, this long-lost king, buried before he was out of his teens, found more fame and influence in the 20th century than he ever knew in life. Indeed, the curse story ensured that everyone knew the name of Tutankhamun. It became a staple of school lessons, a subject of debates, and a spark for the imagination of each new generation. Now, with the real deaths receding into the past, the tale of the mummy's curse transformed into a pop culture phenomenon, more entertainment than fear. And so, the curtain rose on a new chapter of Tut's curse, the chapter where the ancient myth meets modern media, from Hollywood horror to comic books and beyond. In the 1920s, right as the real events unfolded, Tut mania swept through fashion and nightlife, a lighter counterpart to the curse hysteria. The allure of ancient Egypt was the height of chic. Women in Europe and America wore dresses inspired by Egyptian motifs, with gold filigree and winged sun designs. They danced the Charleston with snake-shaped armbands coiled above their elbows, perhaps a sly nod to Tut's cobra, and the canary omen. At Paris's Folies Bergère cabaret, showgirls performed in glitzy pharaoh-themed revues with ornamental cobras crowning their heads. Egyptian-style parties became the rage. One could waltz amid replica sphinxes and papyrus decorations. Pop songs like Old King Tut played on the radio, a playful, jazzy tune immortalizing the boy king in catchy lyrics. This exuberant fad showed that not everyone was cowering in fear of the curse, many were simply enchanted by Egypt. In fact, Egypt had just gained independence in 1922, and Tutankhamun's discovery became a proud symbol for Egyptians as well. The curse legend, the fashion craze, the Tutankhamun exhibit tours, all of it intertwined to make the pharaoh a true cultural icon of the Jazz Age and beyond. It wasn't long before Hollywood came calling to capitalize on the curse. In 1932, Universal Pictures released The Mummy, a classic horror film clearly inspired by Tut mania. Boris Karloff played an ancient Egyptian priest Imhotep who returns from the dead, a plot not directly about Tutankhamun, but undoubtedly riding the wave of public fascination begun by his tomb's discovery. In the movie's lore, archaeologists who desecrate a mummy suffer dire fates, echoing the popular curse theme. The image of a bandage-wrapped mummy shuffling forward with outstretched arms, seeking revenge, became an instant icon of terror on the silver screen. Throughout the 20th century, variations on this theme proliferated, from Hammer Films' Technicolor The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb in 1964, to comedic spins like Abbott and Costello's Mummy Escapades. Every time, the underlying premise harked back to that forbidden tomb and its supposed malediction. Even on television and cartoons, the mummy's curse became a staple. Scooby-Doo and Company unmasked fraudulent mummy curses in playful homage to the legend. Most recently, the concept was resurrected yet again in modern blockbusters like The Mummy in 1999 and its 2017 reboot, where the idea of a vengeful ancient curse drives the action. It's fascinating that a short-lived myth born in 1923 has proven to be a treasure trove for storytellers, continually reinvented for new audiences. Beyond films, the curse of Tutankhamun seeped into literature and education. Novelists spun elaborate fictional accounts of haunted excavations and guardian priests casting spells on tomb violators. As early as the 1930s, Agatha Christie, who was married to an archaeologist, wove subtle allusions to archaeologists' superstitions into her mystery novels. Children's adventure books and comics often featured mummy's curse plotlines. A hardy young hero would outwit the spooky curse that adults fell for. In the realm of non-fiction, countless documentaries and TV specials over the years have revisited the Tut curse, usually to debunk it but not without first indulging in its dramatic beat. Even respected authors like V.S. Naipaul and Joyce Tilsley have recounted the saga in their works, analyzing why it captivated the world. The phrase Pharaoh's curse entered common parlance, shorthand for an unlucky streak or uncanny retribution, sometimes used humorously in headlines when multiple related misfortunes occur. And occasionally, whenever Tutankhamun's treasures travel on exhibition or a new tomb is opened in Egypt, media tongues still wag, will the curse strike again? It seems we just love the shiver of a good curse story, especially one safely confined to history. Tutankhamun, through this myth, became not just an ancient king but a legendary character striding into modern lore. Over time, the curse narrative also evolved into a kind of cultural touchstone, often tongue-in-cheek, sometimes taken seriously by the imaginative. People have jokingly blamed the curse of the pharaohs for everything from malfunctioning lights at Tut exhibits to international incidents. In 1970, when a series of misfortunes befell a Cairo museum staff after some artifacts were moved, local papers half-seriously muttered about Tut's curse. In 1990, the British Museum's blockbuster Treasures of Tutankhamun exhibit saw enormous crowds, and a few tabloid stories about visitors who claimed sudden illnesses as divine punishment for gawking at the boy king's riches. Even in recent history, the curse gets name-dropped. When Egypt faced political turmoil in 2011, a rumor spread that someone had blown into Tutankhamun's ancient trumpet and unleashed chaos, a modern twist on the old legend. And when a world war or a global crisis hits, inevitably a cheeky columnist somewhere will quip about the mummy's curse striking again. Through these references, Tut's curse has become a metaphor, a convenient scapegoat, or a spooky joke. It's a way to bring an ancient enigma into present-day contexts, usually with a wink. The fact that people still invoke it, nearly a century on, attests to the narrative's enduring power. Rationally, we know it's nonsense. Yet, deep down, a part of us perhaps enjoys wondering, what if? And so, we end where we began, in the darkness of an ancient tomb, and in the glow of modern fascination. The curse of King Tutankhamun was born from a confluence of extraordinary discovery and human imagination. Strip away the layers, and what do we find? Not an actual hex placed by priests, for none was ever written on those tomb walls jamesmeme.com, but rather a story. A story we told ourselves to make sense of coincidence and to add drama to cold facts. It started as media sensationalism and morphed into folklore, then into pop culture staple. In the final analysis, the curse says more about the living than the dead. It reveals our enduring need for mystery in a world increasingly explained by science. King Tut's tomb gave us unparalleled historical treasures, but it also gave us a timeless tale of wonder and warning. It's a narrative that keeps King Tutankhamun's memory alive far beyond his short earthly life. As we close the book on this mystery, one thing is clear: the real power of the curse lies not in any magic from the mummy's tomb, but in the spell it casts on our imagination. And that, it seems, will never truly perish. If this journey into ancient mysteries stirred your curiosity, don't let it end here. Hit like, share the legend, and subscribe for more untold stories that history tried to bury. There's always another secret waiting to be unearthed.